to my right, pastor, senior pastor of New Covenant Full Gospel Church, Pastor John.
Good morning.
And we have Pastor Adam, myself, Minister Terrell, and we have a special guest, John Jr. Extremely excited to have you here.
Very worried. I'm usually behind these cameras. Good
right.
afternoon.
Right. So excited nonetheless. And before we go into our session, today's session is titled Fatherless Child. But we think there's an interesting clip that we want you to see. And we think that this is going to really set the tone for the conversation today. Let's go ahead and cue that clip up.
Lou, if you walk out of Will's life now, don't you ever come back.
Sit down.
I ain't got time for no lecture.
I said sit down, Lou. You know, Will was doing just fine until you showed up. But now that you're back, you have responsibilities to him.
Look, we're still gonna take the trip.
Oh, bull! Bull! Will is not a coat that you hang in the closet, then pick it up when you're ready to wear it. His life goes on. He's not supposed to be here for you. You're supposed to be here for him.
You get off my back! You think I want this? It just happened! Now, when Will was a baby, I was scared.
Cut the crap, all right? Cut it! Because I've been there. But I didn't run out on my family. I was there every day for them, because that's what a man does.
Fine, Philip. You win. You the man. You a better man than me. You happy? Now, you gonna tell Will or not?
I'm not going to do your dirty work for you.
Fine. I'll call him from the road.
Yeah, then why don't you do that?
Yeah, I'll do that. Daddy-o! What's up? Will, man, I'm glad you're here. Some business came up I gotta handle. So we're gonna have to put our trip on hold. You understand?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Just for a couple of weeks.
I understand.
Yeah. Maybe a little longer.
Yeah, whatever.
Look, I'll call you next week and we'll iron out the details. Okay?
Yeah.
It was great seeing you, son.
You too, Lou.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Will.
You know what? Actually, this works out better for me. You know, the slimmies of summer come to class wearing next to nothing. You know what I'm
Will,
saying?
it's all right to be angry.
Hey, why should I be mad? I'm saying at least he said goodbye this time. I just wish I hadn't wasted my money buying this stupid present.
I'm sorry. If there was something that I
Hey,
could
you know
do-
what? You ain't got to do nothing, Uncle Phil. Hey, ain't like I'm still 5 years old, you know? Ain't like I'm gonna be sitting up every night asking my mom, when's Daddy coming home, you know? Who needs him? Hey, he wasn't there to teach me how to shoot my first basket, but I learned, didn't I? Hey, I got pretty damn good at it too, didn't I,
Yeah,
Uncle Phil?
you did.
Got through my first day without him, right? I learned how to drive, I learned how to shave, I learned how to fight without him. I had 14 great birthdays without him. He never even sent me a damn card. To hell with him! I ain't need him then, and I don't need him now.
Will.
Now, you know what, Uncle Phil? I'm gonna get through college without him. I'm gonna get a great job without him. I'm gonna marry me a beautiful honey, and I'm gonna have me a whole bunch of kids. I'm gonna be a better father than he ever was. And I sure as hell don't need him for that, because ain't a damn thing he could ever teach me about how to love my kids. How come he don't want me, man?
that's years. How many? I don't know how many years later, and it's still having the same impact.
It's got to be over 20 years.
Right,
at least.
right. Same impact as it did the very same day I saw it the first time. I too had that conversation, but there was no Uncle Phil, and there was no Ben there or no Dad there. It was subliminal.
Sure, it's all in your head.
Yeah, all in my head, and I even wrote a song about it. It was called "Raised by a Stranger," and it talks about mom and dad not being there, biological mom and dad not being there. First part of the sessions, we're going to talk about what we saw in that clip and what it means to each of us. I'll start with you, Pastor Adam.
Yeah, powerful, emotional situation. I think the one thing that stands out to me is when Will is talking to Lou, and Lou was on his way out the door, he doesn't call him Dad, like Lou calls him son, but he calls him Lou, as if to say, I don't recognize you as my father. You abandoned me, and now you're leaving again. I don't recognize you as my father, and I think that's important for us to understand that when we're not there to raise our children, then we're giving up the right to actually have them acknowledge us as fathers. You know what I'm saying? And that now it's up to the child to recognize us as fathers or as dads when you abandon them, so.
Pastor John.
Yeah, to Adam's point, you kind of cede that authority, whereas it was I'm the dad, and I'm worthy of a certain level of respect, and biblically speaking, you will always be given that certain level of respect, but it's going to be bare minimum. And who wants to live there? Obviously, the big part of the clip that really resonates with me is the line, "Why doesn't he want me?" And that's one of the insecurities that as a young person you grow up with. What's so wrong with me that he doesn't want me when I came from him? And so many young people struggle with the insecurity over that, with all the things that we're going to be discussing here today that are all related around that very basic question. Why doesn't he want me?
Right. And for me, it was now what you do has to speak to your desire for this relationship as opposed to just the tangibles that I have your DNA, right? Now his actions, in that segue, or as you pointed out, Pastor Adam, when Will calls him Lou, at that point I heard an emancipation, right? I'm no longer kind of forced to obligate you as the title father. Yeah. And yet there's I'm going to see your actions, I see your actions greater than I see the words that are coming out of your mouth, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
he identifies him as Lou,
right?
Because you're not Dad.
Right.
That's just who you are. You're Lou.
Right. And his reactive behavior, his reaction encapsulates what many fatherless children go on to live throughout their adolescence, and some even their adulthood.
Sure.
Right. It's rejection, creating that level of denial, right? This propensity to want to be the biggest and the baddest and the boldest within yourself.
Because you have to mask the pain.
Right.
What did you think about the clip?
I'm of the same mind as it pertains to putting the traumas and the insecurities on full display. It was a very brief moment, because seeing the actors play it out, but knowing that that's the feelings that the majority of children are dealing with or could be dealing with, that's the common, that's a common thing that kids nowadays have to live with. It truly it puts in perspective the amount of dysfunction that people are forced to live with and deal with as they grow older, and why certain behaviors may be difficult to break when this is what you're being taught so young.
That's very true. That's a very good point you raised there. What are the long-term effects of growing up with the idea that your parents don't want you? beyond obviously how the child
Right.
reacts to certain things, but that child who's struggling with this whole thing becomes an adult who still struggles with this thing,
Right.
who becomes a parent themselves who struggles with this thing, who becomes a husband who struggles, or a wife who struggles with all of these things, becomes a grandparent who struggles with these things. What are those emotional and psychological impacts? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question.
I think one of the things that even as I'm sitting here and you brought up that statement about the fact as to why doesn't he want me, one of those things is the fact of value.
Yeah.
You abandoned me obviously because I don't have any value. I'm not worth anything
I'm not worth you staying.
to you. So therefore you abandoned me. And so now for the rest of my life, I'm going to struggle with self-esteem, my own personal self-image. I'm going to struggle with whether or not if I have worth, if I add anything to anybody else's life. That's a significant thing because that literally debilitates you and it keeps you from operating normally and healthily in relationships. You see what I'm saying?
And first of all, you really don't even have a picture of what a fulfilled relationship is because of this brokenness or this huge impact on your life at such a young age. Your mindset is out of what you have experienced, and not having to experience the full picture of parenting in terms of a mother and a father. You develop a half,
Sure.
hearted half approach, not to things, and life fills in that void.
Yeah, you're very.
And life is not always kind.
That's the absolute truth. Nature abhors a vacuum. And if there is a vacuum, particularly of fatherhood, it's going to be filled with something. Now, what that is, God only knows.
Let's get into that. Let's talk about the impacts of fatherless children. Rejection of authority. Right? You touched on that, like really, like anger, right? Just
Sure.
angry, and I remember you said that as well in one of our previous sessions. Just angry and don't know why you're angry. Right? Emotionally out of touch. Right?
Oh,
And
that's true.
I remember going through those phases of not knowing why I felt a certain way, but at the same time not really having anyone to correct me.
Sure.
Reality had to correct me. Experiences had to correct me, right? And then lack of identity, lack of commitment, insecure.
Sure.
So let's talk about some of the real life experiences that we've actually endured under these guidelines, under these situations.
Get a start. Well, yeah, I guess. I guess it don't apply to you, right?
Can I just start out with this? And with all of these things, I think the common denominator here with rejection of authority, anger management, emotionally out of touch, lack of identity, lack of commitment, insecurity, if you really think about it, the father and the mother, particularly the father, it's where we derive these things from.
Yes.
It starts with him.
Right.
It starts in terms of him. First of all, if in terms of abandonment, he's the one that gives me my value. He's the one that assigns me worth.
True.
He lets me know I am of value and I am worth something. From that point forward, we understand that he is the authority figure. He's the one, he's the disciplinarian. He's the one that sets the infrastructure and the structure of the family household. Right. And so all of these things in one way or another are derived from the father. So if you are now talking about an abandonment of those things, and as Pastor John is talking about the fact that nature does not like a vacuum, now you got everything else seeping into that spot, trying to fill in that gap.
And this is a cycle that we see play out time and time again.
Absolutely.
And so that we're here not just to talk about the problem, but we're also here to talk about hopefully breaking that pathology.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you're dealing with the impacts of being fatherless, I remember wanting to join the gangs, wanting to be around the drug dealers because there was a sense of security. It was a false sense or perspective or perception, if you will, of belonging.
Sure.
Like they were committed to each other and they were connected to each other.
Sure.
And I didn't necessarily see that those individuals also had fatherless homes, right? But I think you said this in service today. There's a lot of things that bind us together more than it is that separate us.
That's right. That's right. And and the question becomes, how do you navigate through those waters?
Right.
You know, the insecurity is tremendous.
Right.
It's tremendous. Not just in I mean, think about it from a relational standpoint. How can I trust anybody from a relational standpoint if the ones that were supposed to love me don't? Why in the world would I believe what anybody says if I can't trust what my daddy says? You don't have a chance. You know what I mean? Obviously, from a physical security standpoint, why do we get together in gangs? Obviously, there's a sense of belonging that's a part of that, in terms of being a part of something that's bigger than yourself. But then there's a physical element, a physical security element that's a part of that as well. Knowing that I'm not out here by myself. That if stuff goes down, you know, something goes to the left, I got somebody, some guys I can call that will come and actually physically put their lives on the line for me. I don't have that at home because there's no dad there to say, I'll die for you. I'll fight for you. So you're insecure physically, you're insecure emotionally, you're insecure financially, because we know the statistics on that, you know, and all of these other areas of your life. So you grow up really unstable, in an unstable way of growing up. And it's not your fault or anything like that, but it definitely has lasting impact, you know, on the individual.
And you said it's not the fault, but it is the fate that the child has to endure.
Yeah.
Right. And don't get me wrong. It's clear that God has had His hand in it from our lives, beginning of our lives, until this point, where there was a change that took place at some point. But for the child that's out there who does not have a stable or even a father figure to gravitate to, I think what I also want to make sure that we talked about this in pre-production, we're not undermining the efforts of the mothers. As you pointed out, there's things that they have undertaken that they should have not had to.
That's it.
But it does not negate the deficit that is created in the child that does not have both parents.
Just think about it from a physiological standpoint. Did you have something for that?
Well, small point. I was just going to say that in each of these categories that we put for the impact of being fatherless, I'm sure there's plenty more we haven't listed. Yeah. But in each and every single one of them, I can point out an intentional, specific thing that my dad does. All credit, I suppose, that he did specifically to resolve each of those potential issues that may have become something in the future. I think it just goes to show. And then to your point about single mothers, I'm sure that we can find another list that talks about the impact of being motherless, and now the boxes they're having to fill here, as well as the impact of being fatherless. And that's, like you said, we're not trying to undermine their efforts, but it's a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know, the reality becomes this. When I was 12 or 13 years old, I had a wet dream. Who am I talking about that? My grandmama? Exactly. What she know about that? That I'm going to talk to her about? Nothing. Nothing. But case in point, when my children had theirs, we had conversations. I know exactly what you're talking about. I was there. Let me help you here now. Let me show you this. Let me talk to you about that. And we navigate through that whole thing. No, you didn't pee in the bed at 12, 13 years old.
They're different.
Right, you don't see no yellow stain on the bed. Now this is different. And so,
please.
And so we have these dialogues around this stuff that you're just simply not, as a woman, mother, not equipped to have by virtue of just experience. It does not negate all the great things that the woman does do, and but that's not what we're talking about here. Right now we're talking about fathers.
Right, and not to say that girls are not fatherless as well. This is, child is male or female child. But to the same impact, there's certain things that a father can teach the daughter about men that a woman cannot, or at least not from the perspective of a male, right?
So I don't know if I should say it or not. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say. Yeah, I'm out here a little bit now. I'm gonna say, if you could teach her some stuff about male men, and that to that degree, as a fatherless daughter now, then you might not have picked the joker that you picked to father her by.
And that's true. That's a reality that I think a lot of women live or relive.
That's
Right?
that's a hard truth,
Yeah.
but it is a truth.
It's a hard truth. And when you are giving your daughter an advice as a mother and not having a father, a male perspective, a good man's perspective, put it that way, a good father's perspective.
Sure.
Essentially, what I think you may paint the picture for them to what worked for you.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's the right way, but
Right.
it's the way that worked for you.
It's what you know.
Right.
It's what you know.
And so, it's important, as you said, John Jr., is that these impacts have a long-lasting impact on the child and the child's choices, the child's development, the child's approach to things. And sometimes that's not all negative. Sometimes it's you overexert yourself.
Sure.
And trying to put up these walls, and this almost serves as a soul tie, where you're to the point where you're so tied to not being like your mother or father who wasn't there.
Sure.
That you everything is to that end. I have to accomplish this, and nothing else outside of this is going to make me not accomplish this. And you lose relationships, you lose connecting with people because you're so hard pressed to not do or to not to repeat.
There was another line in there as well. Another one of those impacts was the lack of identity.
Yeah.
The whole notion of who am I?
Yeah.
Obviously we're raised, 72% of African American children are born to single parent homes. Those primarily are homes that are run by the mother. She can give half of who you are. But there is another part of who you are that comes from the knowledge of your father and is reaffirmed by him over and over again throughout your life, for boys or girls, doesn't make any difference. That sense of this is I am his legacy, makes all the difference in the world in the life of a person as they grow. And not having that identity is something else,
You want to give me some perspective on, and we're going to move from the impacts, but what I want to hear now is some of the experiences that I had to live through based on these impacts and not having our father present in the way that was essential to our growth.
Right. Well, I'll just kind of tie that into the whole lack of commitment, because that's exactly where I was going to go.
Okay.
It's important that we have commitment, but if we don't have that model,
Right.
that pattern, that template,
Yeah.
by which we know how to be committed to something,
Right.
then we aren't committed. We become inconsistent
Right.
in our commitment
Right.
to people,
Right.
to jobs. Probably part of the reason why you can't maintain a job on a regular basis, because there's that lack of commitment, that lack of consistency.
Right.
And so for me, my dad, we get along great now. Love him. Man, I love him. But initially beginning on,
Right.
wasn't consistent.
Right.
And here's the thing. It might be a promise to do something. It might be, I'm going to take you somewhere, or I'm going to purchase something for you. I'm going to come spend some time with you. To a child is everything.
Right.
When a dad or a father speaks their word to a child and they say they're going to do something for them, man, their heart is all wrapped up in that.
Right.
The problem comes in is when that father doesn't do what he said he's going to do. You have denigrated that commitment.
Right.
Now dad is showing me what it means to be not committed.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? And now that's my
Regardless.
motto.
Yeah.
That's my template.
Right.
That's what I literally live out for the rest of my days until a change comes.
I love that.
And so it's important, again, just as I'm using in my own life, that you really figure out, okay, what he did was not the right thing to do. Let me go and figure out the right thing to do, and let me be that.
And we'll pick back up on that. So what I love about these sessions is that they are live, and any viewers that have questions, we actually try to answer those questions during the session.
Absolutely.
So Jalen, we've got a question.
Not necessarily questions, just live comments.
Okay.
Go for it. One person said, I'm glad that you're talking about the girls not having a father, because their issues are different in many ways and the same in others.
Okay.
speaking to what you were talking about earlier.
Sure.
And then another person said it's also important to have men mentors for those children who do not have fathers and who will be fathers.
That's true.
Very, very important.
Very true.
I'll take it from this perspective. I do have a daughter, and if you're watching, I love you, Sabria. She's my inspiration for so many things, and I go out of my way to explain to her the value of having respect for a man and a man respecting her. And I know that's an audible, right, what I say, but what I show her, how I treat her mother in front of her, speaks to much higher
Absolutely.
values, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think
Well, it shows consistency as well.
Absolutely.
There's a cogency between the words and the deeds.
right.
And that has all the value and power in the world. Think about one of the comments that was made was regarding the girls, the effects on women, young women. How then does she learn how a man should treat a woman? If there's no man here to show me by the treatment of my mother or by the treatment of me as a young woman, how would she know what's going to inform her opinions about what makes a good man if he's not there? Who's going to be the one to say, no, baby, not that guy right there. He's full of mess. I know he's full of mess because when I was that age, I was full of, So she becomes a prey for any guy to come along with and tell her what she thinks is the right thing at any given time. But the role of a father is he's there to protect her from all of that kind of stuff, to make her wise to the game. And he's also there to be an example for her. This is how a young man should treat a woman, particularly, even more so, this is how a young man should treat you. If he doesn't treat you like I treat you, then you need to keep looking for the next guy. He needs to measure up to this standard at the bare minimum. Now, what are you telling her when you're not there? Are you still telling her that if he doesn't treat you like this, that you can leave? Well, if he treats her like you treat her, which is to be absent, which is to be sometiming, which is to make promises and don't keep them, she will accept that as well. Why? Because she's had a lifetime of practice with you.
And that's consistent with the male's behavior. Absolutely.
And that's consistent.
So consistency in good and bad, it's still consistency.
That's right.
And that's a great point, foundation, male and female, because another misnomer I think that we have is that when the male child gets their how to approach women from the internet or from the street, then essentially we develop that cycle of bad men for the daughters.
That's right. That's right.
Because we're looking at them and unappreciating them, or appreciating them in one sense and underappreciating them in another sense.
Absolutely.
And so for me, when I first started dating, I had no clue. I had no clue. I thought the whole object was a woman to have sex. Right? And so, ignorant as that may seem, there was no model or no template. There was a model, and the model that I saw was the neighbor who had a whole bunch of women.
There you go.
You see what I'm
There
saying?
you go.
And so there's nobody there to center my understanding, to put me in a position to know what was right versus what was wrong.
Right. Absolutely. And it makes all the difference. I'm sorry.
No, I wasn't going to say anything. But again, I think it's interesting because your formative years are the years that literally shape and mold you mentally, psychologically. When we have that relationship with our dad and with our mom, my relationship with women is a direct result as my relationship with my mom. My relationship with other men is a direct result as my relationship with my father, and vice versa. And so there is absolute significance in the family unit. The reason why there is a mother, the reason why there is a father, because they have different jobs, similarities but different. And it's important that you actually construct the right template, the right pattern, so that if the wrong pattern shows up, they can easily identify it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's important that you have that right thing happening. It's and just like you gave the example of you saw the wrong pattern, and so that was the pattern that you followed after, because there wasn't anything else to compare it to.
Exactly.
That was it.
Exactly.
Your standards, regardless, and I know we got a question, but your standards, regardless of they're good or bad, there's a standards that are set, and that's what you reach for.
Yeah.
And I tell my sons this: I said, don't choose a mate based on what you just see with your eyes.
Yeah.
There's other tangibles
There's other things.
that need to be considered before you jump.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because whatever you see with your eyes, I promise you, it's going to change.
Oh, inevitably, it's
So,
going to change.
I promise you, whatever you look at, it's going to look different in a minute. Just give it some time.
Yeah.
But it's what you don't see
Right.
is where the real value
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Question.
So, question from our Facebook Live group. What advice would you give to a young lady who is dealing with the situation that Pastor was talking about? How would she overcome? I'm assuming the situation she's talking about is where she doesn't have a father around to give her the game on what type of men to go after, what type of men should I date?
Gotcha.
What is my standard?
Can I give the advice that you gave me, I
for it.
think
Let's try to
a
see.
day or two ago?
Go ahead.
Very general advice, and I guess from the mouth of the horse itself. My dad told me a couple days ago when I was asking about dating in my age bracket, because I have so many fears about dating in today's generation, rightfully so. But the general advice was that at this point, when we're young, all we have is potential. We have no value, likely negative if we're in college. And as a result of that, and likely whatever we've come from, all we have are simply our goals and what we want to do, what we want to set out to do, our ambitions and potential. So that's what you need to look for in guys this age bracket, and more than likely guys older too. All you can look to see is the general behaviors that you would like to see as well in your future, because their behaviors, your interactions with another person will shape you, whether you like them or not, especially if you're with them over a consistent basis. So that alongside the potential for, I guess, career-wise, mayhaps even children if you're thinking that far, not too early. All of these should help shape your idea of what you would like to see in a man.
Let me add this. Thank you. That's awesome. I would say this to this young lady. Men love seeing women love themselves. And when I say that, when a woman is focused on her goals and focused on being the best her that she can be, not emasculating, and not to the point where they demean other people, but they're seeking wholeness. They're seeking God. They're seeking to meet who they are and seeking that through God. Then men, all of a sudden, they want to disrupt. They're attracted to that energy, that power that and people say, well, I don't want a strong woman. Yes, they do. A good man will want a strong woman, because at the end of the day, what a man can't do or what he doesn't have to do is attractive in a woman. And so when a woman can, I don't have to be there, but yet things are still being executed. I didn't come home at a certain time because I had to work, and dinner is still there. All the kids get fed, and everybody's clothed and everybody's put to bed. That there's nothing wrong with a woman being able to shoulder the load, not having to, but being able to shoulder the load in your stead, working with you and not against you. And that attractiveness for me is it puts a woman in a position that, okay, I am great without you, but I'm better with you, but I'm also good without you. And I hope I didn't lose everybody, but
Go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to say no.
Okay.
y'all just looking like.
Well, let me say, because we're talking about it in the context, we're talking about it in the context of fathering.
Right.
Fathering.
Right.
So I think that in direct answer to that question, what should a young woman do? Well, first of all, there's very little that a young woman can do in that situation. What her mother should do is seek out a solid male who will help her to develop that kind of father figure mentoring relationship with that young woman. Now that's hard to find. Let's be as clear as we can be, especially in a Me Too world. That's extremely hard to find. But it could be an uncle, a granddad, a pastor, a neighbor, somebody who the mother trusts to be able to help to navigate these torrential waters with their daughter, obviously under the supervision of the mother.
Right.
And not getting too far outside of that. We don't get to have any private conversations that your mother doesn't know about.
That's right.
That kind of thing.
Right.
But I think that would be an option that mother and whomever she might think of as a prospective mentor, male mentor to that child could help with.
Yes, absolutely. I think now we're at a point now where we can talk about, we've talked about our personal experiences in terms of the impact of being fatherless, but there's a broader impact. So now I want Pastor John to take us through some of the statistics that we've seen that are pretty rampant in terms of the impacts of a fatherless home.
Well, let's take a look at the numbers then. 63% of suicides, youth suicides, come from fatherless homes. 63%. That's a little over 6 in 10, as a matter of fact. 90% of homeless youth, 90% of homeless and runaway young people come from fatherless homes. Think about that for a moment. The stress, the trauma, the financial insecurity, whatever it may be here is so great that I would be better off out there in the world by myself, sleeping under a bridge, than in this house with whomever else. 85% of all children that exhibit behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. Why? Because there's no structure. There's no one to say, okay, you're going too far. Okay, let's pull it back. No one to teach how to express yourself in a way that doesn't cross the line too much. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. Why? Because there's no one there to provide the structure. And this is not a slam against mothers particularly, because if she's working hard, a job or two or three to try and make sure that the lights stay on, it's very difficult then to also make sure that the children are doing what they're supposed to do if she's out working 16, 18, 20 hours in a day to try to secure the family financially. 70% of all juveniles who are in juvenile detention or probation come from fatherless homes. And that goes to the rejection of authority, because there is no father there to police you. Well, if I don't police my kids, then the police will police my kids.
That's right.
It just, you're going to be accountable to somebody. No, you're not going to be allowed to run buck wild. And if I can rein you in here in the house, then they won't have to do it out in the streets. Makes sense? 75% of adolescents that are impacted by substance abuse come from fatherless homes. Especially in this culture now, where marijuana is legal, and legal doesn't mean right. But,
That's true.
It's just crazy. But even prior to that, I mean, when they were doing the vaping and and all of that kind of stuff, but that's mainlining nicotine. You're mainlining nicotine. So these children are coming from fatherless environments. And then the last one and the big one is 75% of all rapists come from fatherless homes. 75%, 3 out of 4 come from homes where there was no father to teach self-control and how to properly, because we know that all rape is not about sex. In most cases, rape is about domination and authority. And so because there's been no father there to teach not only how to handle yourself from an authoritative standpoint and not trying to dominate other people with your masculinity, which is what the majority of that is, there's also no father there to teach proper sexual restraint and the value of another person.
And these stats are heart-wrenching, but at the same time, no, we're not subscribing that these stats are the only, or fatherless homes are the only condition that produce these, same impacts, right?
None of those numbers are 100%. So when we say 63% come from suicides come from fatherless homes, that means 37% come from homes where there is a father.
That's right.
When we see 85% of children that exhibit behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes, that means that 15% come from homes where there is a father.
Right.
So it's not to say that this is a catch-all. There is no one-size-fits-all.
Right.
But let's just play the numbers here.
Yeah.
The numbers would be dramatically better if fathers were in their place.
Yeah. And I want to say this too, and this may sound like it's indicting those fathers out there that have not stepped up, but I'm okay with that. You know, the thing is this: a child support payment is not a surrogate for a father.
No, it's not at all.
Right?
No.
It's one of those things that even a father that is in the home, a paycheck is not a substitute for being an engaged father. And I think we look at the model of old, that where the father was the provider,
Sure.
and that was their role. That was their role, you know, at least the dominant role that was conveyed, whether
Sure.
it's TV or whatever, is they were the provider.
Yeah.
But then there's no engagement, and even in our generation, very little to no engagement, and essentially we develop into parents as well that if we're not informed or find some way to get educated, we have little to no engagement initially with our children. So I want to go into the next slides. Oh, before we do that, we got one.
Just wanted to give a comment. We were talking about earlier with some of the statistics. One of our Facebook Live viewers said that many girls that grew up in fatherless homes actually become involved in sex trafficking.
True.
As a result, kind of like with the rapists and things like that.
Or perhaps a better way of saying is that many of the girls that are involved in sex trafficking or being sex trafficked,
Yes,
come from
fatherless homes.
Right. Right.
Yeah, where that protection.
Absolutely. That,
Absolutely.
once again, and most of the women, many of the women, I don't say most, many of the women who are involved in sex trafficking, be it willfully or not, did not begin that way. Most of them did not go into it and go into that life saying, well, I'm just going to do this. Right. Most of them were persuaded somehow, coaxed somehow into this whole thing, because there was no fence.
Right.
There was no fence around them to protect them from it. Now, we know that many are kidnapped and things like that as well, and sold off into sex trafficking. And then there are others that just some smooth talking guy talked them into it.
Because there's no belonging.
Right.
No father.
Right. There was some guy that told her, hey, you're real pretty and you're worth it. And she ain't heard all, and she hasn't been hearing that.
Exactly.
You think I am? Well, I'll do it for you, Daddy.
Right.
Next thing you know, here we are.
And that's not every case. That's not every case.
No,
but
there is no
that's
every
very
case.
reality.
Right, there is no every case.
I was going to say that, the need for fathers as well as in cases such as that alone, there's so many external factors that are now able to influence your child, so many other forces that will fill the void. In the case of the father not being there, the internet, talked about this way earlier, the internet is just a scary place, and there's something for everybody.
Absolutely.
Like I said, and nowadays kids my generation and below thereabouts are being actively raised by the internet in lieu of a father. So something will fill it, like you said earlier. Something will fill it.
Tell us how old you are, John.
I am 21 years old, exactly. Junior in college at this point. Yeah.
So the reason why I asked you to say that is because not only does it share with the audience your identity in terms of, you're in the age group, so you're not in another area, or you're not sheltered from the same things that they're exposed to, essentially. But having that father in your life allows you to be in the midst of those same situations, but yet think differently.
Yeah. I think we talk about this in pre-production that I shouldn't consider it a privilege, but it seems that the lack of it is so common that I have to consider what I have a privilege at times. but the ability to look
Well, you
at
better act like it.
the
No, I'm
ability,
just playing.
the
I'm just
ability to
playing.
look at
Well, that's the first laugh, that we've had in the whole call because it's very serious, right?
Yeah, I've been holding back all day.
the ability to look at certain behaviors and tendencies in other people or in other families, walk into a friend's house and see what's going on. And I have the ability to look and say with clarity and absolute honest truth, that's not right. This is a weird relationship you guys have going on here. Obviously, there's some structure, there's some miscarriage of justice, some authority figure that's not there, that's gone wrong. The ability to see that is due to my having a template in the first place, such that external factors will not influence me towards, anything.
Right, I look at it, or I equate it to a chair with 3 legs as opposed to 4. Right, we're both chairs. You got 4 legs and I've got 3, and I'm tipping over. I'm just constantly. You sit me back up, but I'm constantly tipping over. And it's one of those things where we learn how to sit up with the 3 legs, and then when you get to a certain impact or impasse in your life, you can no longer navigate with those 3 legs. You've got to be strong enough to be able to move past this point with something, and you feel that 4th leg that's missing with something, whether it's good or bad. And it draws us into breaking the pathology, which is the next group conversation that I want us to have. Is we've talked about the impacts of being fatherless. We've talked about how we have felt in that situation. You shared with us the benefits of having a father presence, as well as to give you a vision and to be able to quickly assess something's not right, because of the structure that you grew up with. Well, let's talk about what is a good father.
That's a great question. Great question.
All right, who wants to take? I'm gonna throw it to you.
Really? Okay, all right.
It's time to smile a little bit. This is one of those sessions that you don't get a lot of smiles out of.
Well, I kind of want to reach toward talking about this pathology and this idea of it being a consistent behavior, and the fact that it is generational. Okay, most fathers who abandon their children or who are not there with their children are products of those who their fathers abandoned them.
Right.
And so it's a continuous generation in terms of us continuing to perpetuate this pathology, this behavior, this conduct that we continue to carry forward from one generation to the next generation. And this is the reason why it's so important for us to break this pathology and to create a new pathology, a new set of behavioral parameters, if you will, that allow us to move from fatherlessness to fatherhood, and really being there for our children. One of the things that we need to do as fathers, or what actually are characteristics of a good father, is being nurturing and loving. And I know sometimes, in today's society, when it comes to being able to identify men and identify fathers, we want them, of course, to be strong. We want them to be stern. They ought to be disciplinarians to some degree. But I also believe on the same side of that, it is also just as important that you are a nurturing, loving father. Absolutely. That you actually care about your kids. That you're not a sadist. You're not just beating your kids or disciplining your kids because that's how you get off. Right. But you actually discipline them because you love them. Right. And here, discipline is not just taking a belt and trying to beat them, but discipline is really correcting them in love. Right. Showing them what they did wrong and the right way to do it so that they don't do it again.
That's right.
Instead of you taking a different bullet point, I want you to react to what Pastor Adam said.
Well, I love what he just said. I love what he just said, as a matter of fact, as it relates to nurturing, because, like, for me, for my example, like I said, my grandfather was born in 1915. They were not a touchy-feely group of people.
Right.
Okay. All right. And these are the folks that raised me. They were much quicker to hit than to talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll hit first and ask questions later. After you've gotten a whooping, you say, oh, you didn't do that?
Right.
You just assumed it was me. So they were
right.
Right, they were quick to whoop, right? The idea of a nurturing father is a foreign concept to most people. But when you think about it from a biblical standpoint, now let's bring some scripture into this for a moment. The Bible talks about the fact that the children would be olive shoots around the father's table, and it speaks to the notion of a family that sits down at a table and actually eats together. And the father imparts whatever wisdom and nurturing and care and concern for the children that he has there on a consistent basis as well. One of the things we were talking about earlier with how you miss something when you don't have a father, just like you can miss it when you don't have a mother. One thing you miss when you don't have a mother is the nurturing. Is the nurturing. I've got these grandkids now, and the other day, John Jr., as a matter of fact, was feeding our granddaughter, his niece. And when he was feeding her, he's holding her here, he's got the bottle, and she's looking up at him while he's feeding her. And he was like, why she keep looking at me? And I said, because she's associating you with nurture. She's making an association right now in her mind that when I need something, when I need to be filled, when I need to be satisfied, when I have something, I can go to this guy.
That's good.
And the thing is as it relates to us as fathers as well. When our children need something, when they need advice, when they need to talk, when they need a hug, when they need a shoulder to cry on, can they come to you, or is it always going to be man up?
Right.
Is that all it's going to be? Shut up. What's the matter with you?
Right.
No. Sometimes you got to sit down and quit acting like you ain't never had your heart broke.
Come on.
Quit acting like you weren't crying at a pillow.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to nurture and love them through some stuff.
Amen. And that's so powerful, because when we talk about nurturing and loving and providing balance, you as you said, not always being so stern, right? And you had gave me advice at one time is you can view the law, but you don't have to always administer maximum punishment.
That's right. That's right.
Everything doesn't have to have the corporal, but
Right. Everything is a capital offense, right?
Capital offense. And so being able to balance and provide that balance and to this is one thing that I didn't get, and I try to do my best to instill in my parenting with my children, is that we were taught tough love, right? Yeah. And we were taught that I love you because of what I do for you, right? Sure. And it wasn't, the words I love you wasn't necessarily audible or even frequent, right? And so, but we were taught to, you should be able to extrapolate the tangibles or through the tangibles that I love you, right? You have this and you have that. But then it's so important for us to hear those words as well.
That's right.
And so, being able to, as you said, nurture and loving, hearing those words, teaching them what the source of commitment and love and sacrifice comes from, and what it looks like.
That's right. That's all a part of nurturing.
Because whenever I go see my kids, my kids are older. They're adults. They all grown. They grown men, grown women. But I make a note of it. My oldest son will always attest to this fact that when I see him.
You got one child that's not grown.
I have 3 kids. They're all. Oh, that's right. I have one child. I'm not kidding. My bad. I'm talking. Okay. And you know what? Let me just. Okay. So for Sienna, she always comes up to me and kisses me.
Yeah.
And loves on me. My 3, the ones back east, the older ones. Okay. The first set.
Right.
I don't make them, but they know when they see me, they kiss me.
Okay.
And I think for us as a society, sometimes we find that a little bit foreign.
Yeah.
We find that a little bit unusual because, again, men aren't necessarily considered to be emotional. The fact of the matter is sometimes men can be often more emotional than women can.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is, I want them to understand that I, as a father, I love you. Right. I'm not here to harm you. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here, and I want you to know that I love you, and there's nothing that I would not do for you. And I think it's important that kids know that. Right. They ought to know that you love them, that you're not just here to beat them over the head and always discipline them and tell them what they do wrong, but let them know, affirm them, validate them. You know?
Absolutely.
So, and John Jr., you in pre-production, you talked, and you said something earlier in this session. You talked about how you see examples being set and deliberate measures to teach you certain things. Can you share a little bit of that with us?
Okay. This is difficult. Let me specify. There were times when, actually, very often, our dad will intentionally drag me and all four of my other brothers, all five of us, to go out and go help somebody. Back then, it used to be maybe we're just helping dad with his job. Maybe we're just painting, helping somebody clean up their house. Later on, it's become maybe we're helping somebody move out, move in, just close family friends. And even further on, it extended to people we barely talk to at the church. They're moving out. When? Today. Oh, we're going to go help them. Oh, okay. All right. And he would take us out, and he'd set us to work, and he'd work right along with us. And that's coming along, going along, being generous with your time, your talent, and the worth ethic involved in that as well, and working for. We really didn't expect a reward whenever we did this. Maybe we'd get maybe we thought about food, but we knew it was at home, and that's a different thing altogether. But regardless, we didn't expect anything either. That example, that's intentionality he set in saying, guys, get up. We're gonna go help this person. I don't care if you barely know them or anything about them, whatever. Let's go help them out and just be a blessing to them. That in of itself it's just so beneficial, I think, to know that you, in just being yourself, can be a blessing to somebody. Right.
And I can assume the intentionality of it. But in so many ways, you're getting them, and I'm saying it in this way, so just hear me. You're getting them paid for something in the future.
Yeah. So you're constantly sowing seeds.
Yes. Yeah.
That will reap a harvest later.
Right.
You know, and that's always the intention. So don't worry about whether or not you're going to get some money for it. You know, one of the things that I've heard this stated before. If I remember who said it, I will tell you, but I can't remember who said it. It's not original. But he says you need to be able to recognize an opportunity when there's no paycheck attached to it.
Right. Like that.
Be able to recognize an opportunity when there's no paycheck attached. And what God is constantly providing us with are opportunities.
Right.
And the check comes later.
Right.
You
Right.
know, the check comes later.
Right.
The payoff for what you did
Right.
comes later in terms of and who knows what it's going to look like.
Right.
Most of the time, it's not going to look like what you put it out as.
Right.
You know, it's not. But one of the things that I learned early in my life about men is that we bond over work. As a father, it was always been very important to me that my children bond with each other, because one day I'm going to leave.
Right.
One day I'm going home with the Lord. And when I do, it would be nice that my children were still together.
Right.
So how do we make sure that they keep bonding and filtering their own relationships, keep them working together?
Right. That's powerful. Yeah, I can. We have a question. Let's go ahead. Let's take this question.
Sure. Question from a Facebook Live viewer. What about fathers who are in the home but are absent for whatever reason?
Oh, you're talking about Adam. Not Adam.
Please clean
you
that
Adam.
up. Please clean that up.
Genesis Adam.
Oh.
Genesis Adam.
Well, why was he looking at me though?
I realized it after I said it.
So what about fathers who are in the home physically but are absent mentally
and emotionally, spiritually.
So we talked about this in terms of, what is a good father? Breaking the pathology. We believe, and we talked about this, that the father needs to be intentionally engaged.
Absolutely.
And so this, whether it's to the father or whether it's to the child of the father or the wife of the father, we believe that father needs to be encouraged and understand the benefits of applying themselves and they're engaging with that child and being able to to speak life into that child, because as we've talked about, is that you can look at the things that you check the box with the child, or they're in their room, they're doing their work, and you know, they're coming home, and really not know anything that's emotionally going on with that child.
Sure.
And so stop assuming that because you provide and you've given the basics in terms of shelter, food, and clothing, that that child is holistic.
Right. So when I say talking about Adam, I mean Adam from Adam and Eve in the garden. Adam. When the Bible says that the woman did eat and gave also to the man with her, meaning that he was physically present when she did it, but he was absent in his action. He was absent in his resistance to what was going on. And and as a family, what do you do when the father is physically present but not performing his responsibilities to whatever level we're trying to set? Now, let's level set first. We have to make sure that we're on the same page, you and the father, as to what his role actually is. Because in his mind, 9 times out of 10, I bet he thinks he's performing his role. Because he may be providing, or he just may be there. So that's the first thing. You got to make sure that the level of expectation is agreed upon as it relates to what his role is. The second thing is,
Can you clarify that for me? Because it's really not the expectation of the wife, because I know you're not saying that.
well,
You're
I'm saying all three.
expectation of the God.
I'm saying all four. I'm saying the husband, the wife, the child, and God. Okay. I'm saying that we have to figure out what the expectation is, because he doesn't know. Well, I'm willing to bet he believes he's meeting it all.
Got it.
You see? So, okay, now we need to figure out what your role is, what you should be doing as a father. All right, because, you know, like you said with the child support, most guys pay the child support. They say, well, I did my job. I paid child support. Well, that's the easiest part of your job. So now, okay, we go to the scriptures. Here's what the scriptures say your role is, that you're supposed to be a nurturer, you're supposed to be training, you're supposed to communicate, you're supposed to be raising them up in righteousness and holiness and things like that. So we find out what that is. Okay, now do you believe you're measuring up to these things? No, I'm not measuring up to those things. Okay, well now let's put a plan in place to get us moving in that direction, provided that he's willing. If he's not willing to do that, then it's going to take a whole lot of prayer. It's going to take a whole lot of prayer and small incremental steps. And small incremental steps.
You know, a lot of times I think fathers negate the job of fathering because of the relationship or lack of relationship that they have with the wife or with the ex or the mother.
Sure. The kids are a package deal.
And in some ways they're limited because of those logistics or whatever, right?
Sure.
But then there's also the opportunity that the father always should continue to take advantage of, is being that child's father. Someone told me this a long time ago. I don't need permission from anyone in this earth to be a father to my children. And I think a lot of time we wait for this rites of passage based on the relationship that we may have with the other parent, and not necessarily the responsibility to the child. And if the child receives me or not, it is still my responsibility to be that child's father. And so that's where, you know, I think I say that to you fathers out there that are struggling, and maybe you don't get all the check marks in terms of you're providing this, and that, but you have a responsibility to that child. And God is so good that even the little bit that you have can be a world of identity, a world of foundation for that child. So as we move towards our closing, you know, comments, talk to me about that in terms of, we're talking about changing the pathology, breaking it, and what is a good father.
Well, let's before we get to that, let's backtrack and run through the notion, because let's ferret that out a little bit more as it relates to what is a good father. Let's do that a little bit more. We talked about the nurturing part of it. We talked about providing balance when you were talking about the chair, so to speak. Over the course of our conversation, we've talked about setting examples and all of these kinds of things. We haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about communicating.
Right.
It's true. We haven't really talked a whole lot about that. We talked. the providing with the shelter and things like that, that's kind of built into us traditionally. We've talked a little bit about accountability in the context of discipline, but not a lot about it in the context of setting examples and working with someone. That's a part of the role of a good father. The communication part of it is big. Because remember, we're not, when we say communicating, we're talking about being an encourager, being a teacher, being a trainer of the kid, of the child. But the communication isn't just verbal. The communication is also physical. You know, because actions still speak louder than words. And so we have the statement that we were talking about as it relates to hypocrisy. We were having that conversation earlier, you know, where the father is saying you shouldn't smoke. Well, that don't work. That doesn't work. So the communication needs to be consistent, and it needs to be perpetual. Okay, so we need to be saying the same thing over and over again, and we need to be saying it, you know, on and on, and living it on and on as well to be good fathers. We have to be consistent with what we say and do. There's some other things about it as well. We talked about being fun-loving. Nobody wants a mean father.
Nobody wants a mean father.
Nobody want no mean dad. Nobody want no mean mom.
No.
Can we smile sometimes?
Sometimes.
At some point.
Every time our kids see us, there's a scowl on our face. We're mad at the world mad at us. Every day is the worst day of our life.
Kicking the cat.
Right. Kicking the cat, slapping the dog, spitting in the goldfish. You know, we don't, you know, Minister Terrell talked about this earlier with being actively participants in the life of the children. Now, so we want to actively participate in their lives with the things that interest them, and we also want to actively engage them in the things that interest us as well.
Okay.
Shoot.
I was going to say, it is another example, I suppose. It is the weirdest thing to me whenever I'm going out with friends or something like that, and my dad will be like, okay, where you going? Going here. Okay, who you going with? I mean, you're probably not going to know any of them. Just give me some names. Give me a couple names. Mark, Mel, you know, Josh. All right, cool. All right, have fun. What just happened? Okay. Will any of those come in use? And the answer is yes, apparently, because a lot of the relationships that continue, that become consistent for me, my dad, who may not have been, maybe wasn't truly there, obviously, while we were fostering our own thing, regardless, he's shaped our interactions because of the example that he's set, and as well in being intentional, asking for their names and whatnot. There's a parent safety measure in there, of course. I need names in case something happens, of course, while you're going out. But it's being actively engaged and worried, so to speak, and letting your child know that I am engaged in your safety. All of those things are helpful.
I don't think there's anything wrong with a father getting involved in their children's life in terms of who they associate with. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be the kind of person that asks you questions. Ask my oldest son. I'm asking him questions every time I talk to him on the phone. Who you with? Who you dating? What you been doing? How's your job going? What's going down the line? Because I know for him, he's not going to automatically offer information.
No, he's like the CIA. He don't tell you nothing.
Right. You get 2-letter words like out of my
I'm like,
17-year-old.
man. I'm like,
how you doing?
But it's important that you are actively engaged in that relationship, so that they know that you're interested. That they know that Dad cares about me. He's not just going to let me associate with no do-gooders and naysayers and robbers and you know, people who are plundering all over the place. I can't believe it, plundering.
They're out there plundering and pillaging.
All this medieval talk.
One time I was coming home from work one day, and I saw one of my sons. He was walking down the street with a person. I don't want to say who the person was, but he was walking down the street with a person, and I pulled up. I saw him going from the house or whatever, and I said, where you headed? And he said, well, such and such. I said, you know, where y'all going? He's like, we're going over such and such place. I said, all right, well, walk on to our house, and I expect you to be back home in about 15 minutes. Oh, it's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Ain't no curfew issue, no like that. I said, no, man, that ain't the one.
No.
I'll see you back here at the house in 15 minutes.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Well, you remember how Abraham was so adamant about the wife that was chosen for Isaac.
That's right.
Right, and that was the father setting those stipulations, not Sarai. It was,
Right. It was the
Abraham.
father. Right.
And so, if we don't give them some values, if we don't share with them our values, and the things that we've learned from the mistakes that we've made, then where's the teaching? Where's the are we allowing them to just coast through their adolescence and then they learn their own or set their own foundations when they become adults? You don't start living when you become an adult.
No.
And unfortunately for some of us, we had, and that's why we're pulling all of these fragmented ways and values and lifestyles from all these other places. And so our job is to help them set up their value system,
Right.
and encourage them to not only thrive at the younger levels, but also to continue to practice that as they become adults.
Right. Last thing that we had on that particular list was to lean in.
Yeah.
Was to lean in. So, and we separated that from being an active participant. We made it its own separate thing. Why do you think we did that?
I'm confused.
So leaning in is those uncomfortable moments where you don't necessarily are going to, or not necessarily going to be received super well. Like, oh, come on in, Dad. Let me tell you about this. No, it's that leaning in to be engaged, but at the same time, seeing the child go through something, and not just meeting them with the get up, you're gonna be all right, but say, hey, I went through it too, and in this moment, I went through X, Y, and Z. I made mistakes. I didn't do everything right. Dad wasn't perfect. I went through this, or sharing some experiences, and you lean in to the point where you're showing them that you're not Superman, or you weren't always Superman as they may depict you to be. And it gravitates them or motivates them with substance and not just words.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important too, because even in terms of a father communicating with his children, the first thing we need to understand is that the words of a father are powerful. They are significant, and they have gravitas with them. Okay. And so it's important that when you're speaking to your child, that you are cognizant of what you're saying to them, because you literally hold their life in your hands in terms of what you say to them. I think it's also important too, in terms of the whole leaning in idea, is the fact that I'm able to have a critically important conversation with you. Yeah. It might not necessarily be the most comfortable conversation that we need to have, but as a father and as a dad, my concern and my love for you puts me in a place where I need to talk to you about these particular things. And in my talking to you about these things, I'm able to be vulnerable with you. Yep. I'm able to open myself up to you to show you the mistakes that I made in my life so that you won't make the same mistakes. That's right. That's valuable.
And I'll do this. I'll let you give your final comments, but I just want to say this one piece. Enforcing spending time together has been the theme in your house. And I think it's extremely important that we talk on that point. Is, like we do a thing at my house where there's no phones at the table, right? no electronics at the table. And sometimes I'm sitting there with my laptop, so they'll walk up and say, Dad, no electronics at the table.
That's right. That's accountability.
Right.
That's accountability.
And it's forcing that moment to interact, right? Maybe setting aside time specifically for that interaction. I think this is extremely important. You push some of the children out of their comfort zone, but at the same time, you influence that engagement. I want you to give your final comments, and then we'll close out.
Okay. For this, I'm praying that those on the receiving end of this live stream can have taken something away from this. If not the fact that I am currently sitting with 3 good fathers in the room, and if that fails, if them and all their advice and the little bits and pieces they've been able to give those of you listening here today, if that fails, there's always God who sets the greatest example that there ever has been or ever will be, and He's always there for you regardless.
I don't need to close, but anyway, thank you, my brother. Thank you so much, John G. And, it's the Bible encourages us, the church, to be a father to the fatherless in missions. We're to reach out to the sick and the shut in and the fatherless. And so I think it's important that we don't just look at our houses. Don't just look at the fact that God has blessed us to overcome fatherlessness, to become real fathers, and seek out people that need that help. Seeking out individuals, whether it's in your day-to-day, at the gas station or whatever. There's a lot of people that can use the blessings of wisdom that God has blessed us with. And being able to seek those young, and not be intimidated that they're young or they're different. Because in all of our evolutional stages, someone would have walked away from us at some primitive point in our lives, if that makes any sense. In terms of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as they say, right? But there's a development that we all had to reach. And there was someone else that poured a little bit of this into us and a little bit of that in order to give us the status and the stability that we have now. And as you said, John Jr., ultimately, God, our Father, he put us in a position to receive. Because there was many times in my life I wasn't listening to you. I don't care who you was.
True.
Because I didn't know what that model was in terms of receiving even good discipline from a father.
That's right.
If that makes sense, hard discipline from a father. And so when I hear it from someone else who's not any way connected to me biologically or even family, it's rejected and it's taken as you are against me. And I'm going to do everything I can to prove you wrong, as opposed to being nurtured and loved. So fatherless children, fathers that are wanting to be better fathers to their children, mothers that are enduring this situation, hats off to the mothers. Fathers, it's still time. You woke up this morning. God has blessed you to be breathing right now. Start today. Be encouraged that you are a father. I don't care if you're in jail and all you have at your disposal is writing letters.
Do that.
Seek your children out. Start to engage them. Even if you are rejected, start to engage them. At some point, that seed planting that you start today is going to grow in that child's life. May God bless you and may God keep you.